Hello and welcome to the Witness History podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty, and today I'm going to be talking to the man who literally freed Free Willy. Dave Phillips is the director at the International Marine Mammal Project at Earth Island Institute. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Anoushka. It's good to meet you.
Good to see you too. Let's start in 1993. A new film has just hit the screens. It's about a 12-year-old boy who forms this bond with an orca and manages to free him. Can you tell me a little bit about that film?
Well, the film came from an amazing start, which was that the two amazing directors from Warner Brothers decided they wanted to make a movie about a boy and a whale, which was really different than the type Hollywood movies they were putting out. But they had gotten interested in protecting dolphins and whales. And that was the start of the movie that became Free Willy. The movie just had that story of how a boy and a whale connected and what it led to. They were trying to figure out how we were going to find a whale. We have to find a whale that's going to be in this movie. And they looked around trying to figure it out, and they ended up in Mexico City at a place where they had one orca whale named Keiko, and nobody knew about that whale. Nobody knew about the park. It was all sort of just kind of out of the way. The movie came out, and we actually got involved with it, with those producers, because we asked them if we could put an 800 number, a toll-free number at the end of the movie to see how people could get involved with efforts to save the world's whales. Warner Brothers allowed us to do that. And so the movie came out, and it just spread like wildfire. It was a blockbuster movie. Kids loved it across the country, around the world. And they all started calling the number to get connected because they wanted to do something. The kids that watched that movie, they wanted to know what happened to the whale that was in the movie. In the movie, at the end, the whale jumps to freedom with the help of the boy and goes out into the sunset with his family. So they were like, okay, this is Free Willy. This is the movie Free Willy. So in real life, what's happened to the real whale that was in this? That's what started the whole odyssey of Keiko going from a lone whale at a facility in Mexico City to becoming the most popular whale in the world.
You spoke there about the shot of Willy jumping out of the water, and the film is really all about freedom. It tugs on the heartstrings. You need your Kleenex, your tissue box nearby. It's about a story of connection. When did people find out that that wasn't really what was going on behind the scenes for Keiko?
The movie became so popular that the press started covering it, and then the kids started pushing, and the story started coming out about the real whale that was there. And the whale that was the one who played Willy in that movie was actually caught when he was 2 years old in Iceland, taken by fishermen there to sell to other places, into captivity. Then it started coming out that, well, wait a minute, behind the scenes, once the film crew all finished up and went out of town, there he was still stuck in a little pool in Mexico City, not in great health, all by himself in terms of no other orcas there. And it just started to snowball. And the kids really were the ones that directed it. They started putting pressure on Warner Brothers, on coming to us, because we were getting the 800 number calls of people saying, wait, what can you do? What's happening here? To the Reino Aventura, the place where Keiko was living, pressure on them to try to do something. Like, okay, the movie made $100 million, but what are you doing for the whale? What are you doing for the hero of your movie?
So after the film's come out and we've had this whale literally embody freedom, the visual representation of freedom, which goes on to be the poster for the film, and everybody knows it. It's such an iconic image. What did Keiko's living environment look like once they were wrapped with the shooting?
When the film crew was all finished and turned off the lights and went away, he was in a very tiny concrete tank. There were still crowds that come there in Mexico to see him, but it was a very stressful environment. and it resulted in some illnesses that he had. He has skin papillomavirus that caused problems. He was underweight because the water is warmer than it needs to be, warmer than it should be, because he's from Iceland.
Did you go and see Keiko in that habitat yourself?
I did. So after the movie came out, all that pressure came on Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers turned to us, and the director of the film called me up and he said, you got to help us do something here. We're getting so much pressure. We're really good at making a movie, but we know we wouldn't be good at all at like trying to save a whale. Will you help? And my first inclination was, because I'm a biologist and I've been working on whales in the wild, about the Whaling Commission and about trying to protect dolphins from fishing industries, those sorts of things, where there are hundreds and thousands of whales. And this was one whale. And I was like, I said, I don't really have my expertise in that, like trying to figure out, besides which, no one has ever been able to get a captive orca back to its native waters. And he's like, so you just go down there. He's just go see him, And so I said, okay. And so that's where it started. I went down to Mexico City. I went to Reno Aventura. I sat in the stadium seating, looking down at the orca that was in this little pool. And my first inclination was to say, and I started thinking about it. I started thinking, what would we do? Like, how could we try to do this if we were to even take it on? Could it be done? Was it possible? What would it cost? How would we raise the money? All those things jumped into my mind. And so my first inclination was to think, I just don't know that there's going to be a way to do this. And at the same time, I met Keiko. He has an ability to impact people. He's was amazing, incredible animal. And that all the trainers had that experience. All the people that worked on the movie had that experience. Many of the kids in Mexico loved coming to see him. And I started to feel like we really needed to try to do something for this animal. He's not in good shape. We got to do something for him. The kids want something done. The people that saw that movie felt like they needed to stand behind it. And so at that point, with some soul searching, we decided to take on the campaign.
When you were sat up in the stadium seating and you looked down and you could see this whale, you said in a very, very small pool of water, probably, daily routine of just swimming in circles. How did it make you feel?
One part of it, just almost had me in tears to think that this animal that is so ill-suited to live in captivity. They're meant to be wild. They're meant to be in the ocean. They're meant to live in the ocean, in their communities. You couldn't find a situation any further from that. There's no roadmap of how do you rescue a whale from a captive tank and get him back to his home waters. How are you going to do that? And so it was going to be a wild ride. But at the same time, you know what? We wanted to do the best we could for Keiko.
It's kind of like the perfect storm of willpower to get something like this done. But from the conversation we've just had and my absolutely zero expertise in this area, it sounds like you had two issues. First of all, the size. He was not 2 years old anymore, so transporting him was going to be difficult, right?
We had to make a plan. We knew we had to get him out of Mexico City. We couldn't go directly with the situation that he was in, where he hadn't been able to be taught about how to eat live fish. He had to be brought back to health. He had to go through all the steps that he would need to be ready to go anywhere near the idea of being in the wild. So we knew we had to build a facility, and we actually raised the funds to build a rescue center in Oregon that would have natural seawater, no performances, trainers that were working with him to train him how to eat live fish, much, much larger. And so that was our number one step. And so in terms of transport, we convinced UPS to donate one of their jets for transporting him. I remember that day very certainly, as we loaded Keiko into this shipping container filled with water and ice. And we had to lift him out with a crane in a sling and then lower him into this box where his sling would hold him. And then we could move that off to the airport in Mexico City and fly him to Oregon. And that was step one. We didn't know how far we would go. Maybe we'd only ever be able to go that far and he'd be in another facility where at least he didn't have to jump for tricks, and it was more educational and better things in terms of enrichment of his environment. Maybe that's as far as he could go, but maybe he could go farther. And then once we got him to Oregon, we worked on him for a year and a half, and he just started blossoming. He put on 3,000 pounds of weight.
What? 3,000 pounds?
He did. And his health went, his papillomavirus went away. So his medical condition started getting much, much better. People could still see him only through underwater windows, not through seating, was not performance. It was just watching rehabilitation in action. And literally millions of people came to see him in Oregon, in a town way out in the nowhere. And they came to see him in droves, to see the rescue and his amazing journey, to learn about that and be part of that, just started building even further.
You said this took a year and a half in Oregon?
Yeah. Now we were confronting the next step. Is the next step possible? What can we do? What can we do? He seems like he's getting better. His health is better. His weight is better. All his blood work, veterinarians, everyone's saying how well he's doing. It really seemed like he was prepared to go the next step. But the next step would be a big one, a really big one, because we were going to have to transport him back to this island, Westman Island, off the coast of Iceland, which was the place that we found that would be the best place for him. It was near where he actually was caught. How are we going to get him there? Turned out there was only one jet capable of doing that, and that was a C-17 Air Force jet from the U.S. Air Force. It was the only jet that could do it. And so we petitioned the Air Force to see whether they would do this as a humanitarian mission for this whale, for the most famous whale in the world. At that point, he'd been on the cover of Life magazine, and the Air Force brought it to their pilots because they do some discretionary things there. And they said, all right, we're working down this list. We could be doing this. We could be doing this. Oh yeah, by the way, there's also this, 10,000 pound whale that we need to transport from Oregon to Iceland. Does anybody want to be the pilot for that? And all their arms shot up. They all wanted to do that. And so that's how we did that. And that was a pretty incredible mission. I was able to fly with him on that C-17.
Yeah, you spoke about him being lowered down into the tank in Oregon and taking to it naturally. What was it like when you put him into fresh water?
Oh, that was an incredible day. Amazing. And his reaction was great. He was rolling over, he was swimming freely, he was in the natural waters where he was born. He could hear the sights, hear the sounds, and see the sights of a natural ocean environment. Whoever thought that this 2-year-old that had left as a baby and went to Canada, Mexico, and the US had a chance to ever make it back to the wild. And I remember when I was on the plane with him on the C-17, I had all strapped in on the sides, and I got out of those and climbed up on the side of the tank that he was in as we were getting ready to come down. And it's probably one of the searing moments of my life to be able to, to be able to say to Keiko, hey, we're bringing you back home. The next step was to see whether there would be any chance that we could actually find his family, which we never did. It's very difficult because there's so little known about the pods of orcas in Iceland. And there's some places in the US and others where they've trained, they've identified individuals and they know exactly which ones are connected to which ones and where they go. But in Iceland, no. But we did know that the next step would be trying to put him in contact with wild whales and see how that goes. Would he be able to stay with them? Would he be so fearful? Would they be antagonistic toward him, etc.? And so that was another big part of our effort as we trained him to follow a boat out of from the bay pen into the net bay, from the bay out into wild waters, and actually have him swim with wild whales, which was a huge undertaking in and of itself. And he did swim with wild whales on a number of occasions with different pods. None of them were his pods. None of them were his complete, where he felt like he would just want to just hang with them and go off with them, which isn't surprising because he wasn't from that pod. And then he actually, after some period of time, with more time on his own in the wild, he ended up going on a long trip of his own from Iceland over to Norway, which was over 1,000 miles. And he had about 5 years in his natural waters, in natural seawater after Oregon, before he passed away. He was 27 years, which is pretty old for a captive orca. The ones raised in captivity don't live nearly so long, but he had an amazing life, was an incredible breakthrough for himself and his ability. And we always have felt that him having that chance to go back to where he came from and having the chance to be out of the concrete tanks and in natural seawater was a great thing for him, his health, and has turned out to be a great help for other orcas too.
Some people might say, because you didn't quite get the Disney ending of him swimming off with his family, and he did pass afterwards, after being released into the wild, that this was a failure. What would you say to that?
Oh, it was so different from a failure. I mean, for us, our goal was to let him go as far as he could, right? And at every step, he was taking a huge humanitarian step forward. From Mexico to Oregon was a huge step that made his life better. Oregon to a sea pen in Iceland made his life so much better. Because the real story is learning about Keiko, an individual, having this incredible odyssey, this epic journey of his life, having that story reach the public, the kids, the universities, the scientists, the public press, it reached people far more with one animal that had that story and people could love and care for, instead of looking into the ecosystem level. It's just, and so it brought a huge different dimension, and it changed my thinking. The story and his epic journey is now like seared into the public consciousness. And right now, if you look around, things have changed dramatically. There's now only one facility in all of the European Union. France just passed a law prohibiting any capture and any display of dolphins and whales. The US, there's only one company that still has orcas. South Korea prohibited, Canada's prohibited. So, and why? It's coming from the public having this view that we could do better. In the Canada law, they called it the Free Willy Bill. And this came from change in public attitudes. People want to do the right things for animals in many cases. And when you look at orcas, the right thing to do is to not allow capture and to find ways to release them to seaside sanctuaries. Sometimes they can't be released all the way back to the wild, but they all can be in like a seaside sanctuary where they're in natural water, not performing, and given a chance to live their lives, thrive, and to be having the lives that they deserve. And so there's a change going on. It's not all the way done, but there's a change going on. And Keiko and Free Willy and that whole, his odyssey, his story, his legacy is making that possible.
Absolutely. Dave, thank you so much for sharing the power of Keiko and your own personal story with us. I really appreciate it. And have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
That was Dave Phillips, the man who freed Free Willy. And that's it for us in this episode of Witness History. I'm Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Don't forget to subscribe to the World Service YouTube channel for more videos like this, or you can head over to wherever you get your podcast from and take a look at our catalogue of over 1,000 episodes. Thank you for watching.